lucid dreaming, dreaming while know that you're dreaming, so being conscious while you're in the midst of a dream, sounds paradoxical because you're awake yet asleep. And it's an ancient teaching, goes back in the East for thousands of years, and in particular, especially the dream yoga, 1,000 years, is special practice of waking up in the dream and using it as a meditative state for learning about life as a dreamlike state. In everyday life, we think we're awake. Normally say, this is what awake is. And we see in the lucid dream state an example of what it is to be more awake, whatever that would be. So for instance, we're in the midst of an ordinary dream, don't know it's a dream. Something odd happens that, whatever it might be, magic, or I start floating, or somehow I realize, this is a dream right now. A moment ago, I thought I was awake, and now I can see that everything's different. I didn't realize before. So from this experience of waking up in the dream, of recognizing that what I'm actually experiencing now is not the full awakening, gives me an idea of what it would be like to awaken further in this life. So there are degrees of awakening there, and so it's not all or nothing, one thing or the other. It's degrees of being more awake to new levels of being. So I would use waking in the sense of we wake up to a new level of reality when we act in accordance with it, when we become aware of a new context, a broader way of looking at life. That's like an awakening. So the ordinary sense of waking up where I was saying that the lucid dreaming sounds paradoxical because we're asleep in bed while it's happening, yet we're awake in the sense that our mind is aware of our state, so it's a reflective awareness. Now this means if I wake up to the fact that I'm asleep in bed, I also understand that there are new rules, there are new conditions that give meaning to my life. As here I am asleep in bed, for example, the impossible is now possible, because I understand this broader level of awakening. So lucid dreaming gives us also an example. If you have only one state of consciousness to refer to, the ordinary waking state, let's say, then you don't really understand what a state of consciousness is. Having different state of consciousness lets us see this consciousness as a state. Otherwise, we don't have a reference. We have no comparison. And this gives us a comparison. To wake up in a dream then gives us a guide for waking up in the rest of our experience. So lucid dreaming is probably most important to us today as a means of studying the nature of consciousness itself, because it's this peculiar balance of a state where the brain is isolated from the environment, yet it's fully active, it's fully awake, as it were. So we have the full degrees of consciousness without exterior input. So it shows, for instance, the theories that say that the consciousness in general is the result of external input, as a behaviorist might suppose, that it's a series of reflexes, for example, and so you have an input from the outside world, and consciousness is some kind of response to it. It doesn't really make sense given the fact that we can have full consciousness without any exterior input. So lucid dreaming is a kind of special case where it shows full isolation from the environment, but full activation and full, let's say, flexibility of the mind while asleep and awake at the same time. An important part of lucid dreaming is indeed the ability to overcome, to a certain extent, the identification we have with whatever's in front of us. One of the recurrent themes in lucid dreaming is people realize they're dreaming. This is a dream. And then they get involved emotionally in some way. Maybe they're excited or they're frightened, but whatever it is, then they lose lucidity and they forget that they're dreaming and then become reabsorbed in the dream. And then you wake up and you say, I see how that works. The identification is so clear in this state. It's, again, a good example. It shows how the everyday life psychology works in the special conditions of sleep where things are perhaps exaggerated, so it can become more clear. The identification is also most obvious when in the lucid dream one looks around and says, this is a dream world, dream chair, dream cameras, dream jacket, dream hands, dream what? Dream Stephen. The whole idea of myself is a dream. It's what I think I was a minute ago until I, in the lucid dream, look and see for myself, this must be an idea, a dream, not what I really am. So it gives us a very direct experience of what otherwise might be an abstract philosophy. I haven't experienced that sense of derealization, I think, that you're talking about, that sometimes can be problematic for people. More typically, what happens is there's a generalization from experience. You find, for example, that in your lucid dream you face some hideous giant insects, and you realize this is a dream, it can't really hurt me, but it then requires courage to face it. You work through it, and it turns out very positively. You've got a new friend or something. You then generalize to recognize that facing your fears then is something that can be useful in the waking state as well. So it's more that what you're learning in the lucid dream practice is the wisdom of flexible action, of how to respond creatively to whatever comes. It's not so much a matter of controlling or deciding in advance what you want to do, but it's being able to reframe what happens in the most flexible, creative way you can. Lucid dreams occur spontaneously, occasionally in people, and in the, let's say, a population of the people who might be watching this video now, this probably will have happened once or twice per year. It happens now and then with people with vivid dream recall, or remember most of their dreams. It will now and then happen that, oh yeah, I noticed it's a dream. What usually doesn't happen is people don't act on that knowledge in a useful way. It's a limited awareness. For instance, they would be in a nightmare, let's say, an anxiety dream, and at the end of it they'll realize, oh, this is just a dream. And so the response to it then would be, and to wake up with relief. But it doesn't make sense to wake up at that point, because you've just decided that it's a dream and it can't hurt you, and that then you have to wake up to get out of it. You see, it's a little odd. So what happens is you reflect on that behavior. Okay, I just realized I'm dreaming in a nightmare, and then I woke up to escape from it. Next time I have a similar experience, I'm going to remember to turn and face it, explore it, say, who are you, what do you want, or whatever it is I want to try out. And then when a similar dream occurs in the future, I can then act in a more intelligent manner, in a way that reflects my deeper understanding of what would make sense. So there's a learning process that can occur. It doesn't have to occur. I think there are some people that have lucid dreams fairly often who don't seem to progress. They don't get clearer in their experience. They continue to make the same kind of errors. For example, if in a lucid dream I see a friend or a dream of someone I know. So look, there's Keelan, a dear friend of mine. So I say, look, it's you, and you're in the dream. Hey, did you know it was a dream? But I don't really think that, you see. And so I've been attracted by the normal habit of, it's a particular person. When I see an image, there's someone really there. When in fact in the dream, I know that's not true. In the dream, I say, this is all a dream. So just because a person appears to me in the dream, why should they actually be there? Or likewise, I'll be in the dream, and it's a dream that's something like the environment I'm sleeping in. I remember once I had a dream I was flying over the San Mateo Bridge, and I thought, wow, this is a dream. And I'm asleep in bed right over that hill in Woodside there, and I just wanted to fly over to see my sleeping body. But that didn't make any sense because I wasn't asleep in the dream world, right? If I were, that would be problematic to try to wake up, right? I wake up in the dream, and what happened to my sleeping body in the physical world? You see, so we have these errors of thought that come from our experience with the waking world, and we have to then learn the new rules of the dream game to see how to play it most sensibly and optimally. So there are specific rules for different realms of behavior that one learns to apply. It's true that in many other cultures other than the Western culture, dreaming has been more important than it is now. I think there have been some changes that have occurred in the last few decades, or in the last generation at least, where dreaming is increasingly valued in the West as well, especially as the knowledge about Eastern teachings have come to the West and have been more widely understood. I'd say that plus the scientific research on psychology and the brain, for instance, that's happened in the last 30 years, has led to a renaissance in interest in dreaming itself. And so I think we're in a wonderful position today with the scientific development that is new and coming from technology and brain sciences, in combination with the Eastern wisdom that has been here for millennia, that together we're going to see something that we've never seen before. It's interesting that in the Eastern tradition, it is thought that every night we go into various levels of sleep, going in from a dreaming sleep to a deeper sleep where all dreaming stops, and we return to the self we were before we were. And that sense of when you remove all the levels and peel off all the identifications and the things that we see instead of what always is, then we can experience every night this return to oneness. And the problem with knowing about it is that people recall very poorly from that state. So it may happen every night, but people don't know about it because they don't remember what goes on there. There are some ideas suggesting that if you develop a more careful knowledge of the dream state and the sleep state, that one can become conscious throughout all the stages of sleep, so that one can experience the fall into deep sleep. Personally, I've had a few experiences where I started out recognizing I must be asleep because there's nothing. There's no body, there's no dream, there's no sense. I remember I had a body, but it's gone. And so I'm left with this pure nothingness somehow. And these are thoughts after the fact in describing it, but it was something like just experiencing that there's a pure nothingness that can be experienced directly. And of course, this same idea is common in the East. But I think we can learn by cultivating awareness as we fall asleep, especially going directly into dreaming or REM sleep. We can learn to become more aware of the transitions from waking to sleep and via dreaming, and that in the East this is thought to be a parallel to the same process that occurs at death. Clearly at death, the brain, if it's brain death, the brain stops operating, and so those parts of our experience of reality must stop. But what we don't know is what happens next. And it may be that you take away the brain, and of course, lots of things will change, but that clearly will leave us with what we had before we were who we thought we were. So it's brain science, and the modern cognitive psychology, psychedelics, many different areas show us that the brain is very important in producing the individual consciousness, those parts of consciousness, for example, that make Stephen Stephen. But there's also perhaps a deeper level that is not mind and not hardware and not software, but is instead the aware, the basic awareness that cannot be said, the unity, is always there and causes all of these states to be what they are. Yes, and in particular in lucid dreaming, at one point I specifically had as my lucid dreaming goal, I wanted to experience the deepest, highest meaning or experience of possible being. And for some months sought out that as a response and did have an experience that essentially amounted to flying through clouds and having the car I was in vanish, the body I was in vanish, and to experience entry into a vast openness, a nothingness that was resonant in an unexpected way. It was like homecoming. It was, I'd forgotten about this state, the source of being, the nothingness, the void somehow. But it was a dream, of course, so who knows what it really is. There are many cultures that value dreams on at least the same level as waking experience. Our culture tends to minimize them and say, dreams, they're nonsense, they're meaningless, they don't really happen, they don't mean anything, they're not important somehow. Other cultures, take it for Aboriginals, for example, in Australia, view the dream time as the source of all important teachings, as this is a time prior to the experience. It's not just a time, but it's an order of being. It's the universe of potential out of which the universe of actuality appears somehow as a small subset. But for these other cultures, the dream time may be more important than the ordinary Newtonian clock time that we ordinarily experience. To my way of thought, the body I experience right now, the body you experience now, is one that we call the physical body. We say, that's the physical body. In fact, it is a body that we experience through our minds. So it's a mental image of the body, and I would stop perceiving that body if something interrupted with my perceptual process. And likewise, in a dream state, I can look and say, look, here's my body. But the body I'm seeing is a dream body. Another way of putting dream body is a mental body. It's something that is being constructed on levels that we're not aware of. It's going on in the mind. So it's a mental body in the sense that, or a phenomenal body, I think is the best term for it. It's not the body people think of. So the usual distinction, physical body, that's the thing we experience while we're awake, and then there's the dream body, this other thing, is somewhat diluted. It's more that we always experience a mental body. That's what it is to experience a body. It's in our minds. Where else? It's like the world around us, in this sense, is a dream. So the difference between the dreams we have when we're asleep in bed and we wake up and say, yes, this strange thing happened, that's one, the usual sense of dream. But there's a broader sense, which is dreaming is consciousness. Dreaming means the experience of something as if it were happening. The sense that there's a process going on, that people are talking, we're doing this interview, we're talking about dreaming, for example, is a bit of reality, but it's a great simplification, because if what's really happening is that the one is being the one and that's all it ever does, and there aren't really pieces that we can cut it up into, then that's the reality. is this nameless, beginningless nothing. We talk in relative terms when we talk about experience and we talk about dreams. Dreaming is the idea that something might happen. So we right now, for example, are having a kind of a dream. And it's a dream that presumably is shareable to a certain extent. So I would assume that later on, if I asked you about this conversation, you'd remember some of it, and so would I, right? And we'd also hope that it will be recorded, and so that other people can listen to it and have similar experiences deriving from it. So the idea is that each of us has a dream in our own minds that may or may not be coupled to some other reality. In the case of physical reality, the physical world, one bit of reality, that's what we're doing right now. Go to sleep at night, I'm asleep in bed and having the dreams that I would have then, that would be another kind of dream. So it's a dream. The way I distinguish the two states is say that dreaming is like perceiving free of constraints from external sensory input. Whereas this state, right now, perceiving the world, is dreaming constrained by sensory input. So the light in the room and the events occurring in the surroundings are input to my dream creation mechanism. So I have a dream that would be similar to the one that you would describe. But in both cases, they're dreams. So whether I'm asleep in bed, what I'm experiencing is a dream, this is a dream too. So in that sense, life is a dream. It's all a dream. What else could it be? So there's then the distinction would be on one side, perceiving is dreaming true, whereas perceiving is dreaming free. So it's the same, a continuum of different ways of organizing consciousness with more or less coupling or constraining to some external reality, some bit of reality really is all it can be. The physical world is one part of reality. It's an important part for our biology. That's how we evolved what we have. But it's nothing like the whole of reality. It's a tiny slice of it. So dreaming, whatever we experience, is always going to be a simulation of whatever that reality might be. When you're in an experience that seems so detailed that you can't believe that you can see every element, hairs on the head, the unnecessary detail of the patterns on the rug, all of these elements, to say that vast complexity, where does it come from? It can't be out there because there's no out there. It's a dream, you're asleep in bed and that there's no sensory input. So what you discover is it must be somehow that the experience of reality is inside us. It's not outside of us. It's a reverse of the usual way of looking at things. Common sense is you look through these eyes, they're like windows, and you see that complicated world out there. But in fact, it appears that the opposite is the case, that in here, if anything, is the world of consciousness, the world model that we experience, and that can have as much detail as any level of reality. How it happens is one of the minor miracles of reality. In a dream state, we have a kind of a creativity that appears effortlessly just by the fact that whatever we experience is constructed. For example, if you were to dream about talking further with me later tonight, you're going to have all the details of my gestures and the way I appear to you in a way that would be quite characteristic, yet probably much better than if you were to write out a description of Stephen would be. Your creativity in the dream state seems to be orders of magnitude past what it is in the waking state. And this is true for everyone. It's just the fact that dreaming is inherently creative, constructive, that we're creating all these realities. So you could look at it as, in terms of the filters, another part of it would say that we always select in our consciousness what part of reality is of interest to us. So there are other elements always that are present that we're not attending to, we're not noticing. And in fact, we have habits in the ordinary life to ignore anomalies, to ignore the things that don't fit in. So there are many constant reminders that could tell us that there's more to life than we're aware of, always present, that we don't usually notice, until the experience of lucid dreaming helps us to do that, to pick up on the fact that waking up in the one state can lead to waking up in another. One of my favorite quotes from Thoreau is that our truest life is when we are in dreams awake. So, and I think you can see what that means is that we're always in a dream, but knowing that it's a dream and being awake to the possibilities is our clearest sense of making use of our full potential. But the way Thoreau put it was much better.